so many new pieces to this IU football team.
To me, that's going to set the tone on how you get ready for games on Saturday in the fall.
I would put that Indiana room up against anybody else in the conference, and that's something that we typically don't even come close to saying.
If you want to get total sickos committee about it, there's a position battle at long snapper too.
This is the Hoosier Huddle Podcast, part of the College Huddle Podcast Network.
Good evening and welcome to the Hoosier Huddle Podcast. I'm Sammy Jacobs. Along with me is T.J. Inman and Jake Gibson of the PawsUp Podcast. We're here to preview Indiana's season opener against the Florida International Golden Panthers. It is the fourth all-time matchup between the two teams. IU has a 3-0 series lead. Just for our listeners, I do have a really grumpy baby with me today. So if everybody wants to meet Maddox, he is making his podcast debut. He is not too happy about it. But TJ will take the reins from here. Indiana, Florida International, 3:30 on Saturday at Memorial Stadium.
Yeah, Jake Gibson with us from the PawsUp Podcast, a podcast dedicated to covering Florida International. Jake, thanks a lot for your time. We'll start with this question. Kind of, what are your expectations for Mike McIntyre's ball club? 4-8 last season, much like Indiana, a bit of a struggle, but a little bit of momentum as they head into this season, thanks in large part, I think, to your young quarterback.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me, and I'm just very excited to see what Mike McIntyre has in store for the Panthers this season. Like you had mentioned, a 4-8 season, back-to-back 4-8 seasons for Coach Mike, and well, considering the fact that when he took on the head coaching role at FIU, it was an absolute I don't want to say dumpster fire, but FIU was having one of their toughest stretches in the history of the program. The fact that he has had back-to-back 4-8 seasons is actually a step in the right direction, but now obviously the stakes have been made much higher in his third season with FIU. I think it's bowl game or bust for FIU. They haven't been to a bowl game since 2019, and obviously you'd like to be in the mix of one of the top-tier teams in Conference USA to compete alongside the Liberty, Western Kentucky, and Jacksonville State, just to name a few. But no, I think this roster that Mike has built for this season is, and not to mention the coaching staff as well, is one of the most complete rosters and the rosters that he himself has wanted to have since taking up the coaching role at FIU. So there's a lot of talent on this team, and just hoping for a great performance in Bloomington on Saturday.
If FIU is to threaten Indiana and keep this one competitive into the fourth quarter, give themselves a chance to win, what is it that they're going to do well that's going to keep them in the game?
They are going to run the ball all over Indiana's defense. One of the most exciting positions on FIU is the running back room, which I dare say is the best in all of Conference USA. You have your two production makers in Shamari Lawrence and Keyshawn Owens from last season, but you also bring in Lexington Joseph, who was FIU's star running back the season prior, but unfortunately missed all of 2023 due to injury. Now you have a three-headed monster in the backfield for the Panthers, and if their running game is consistent and can kill time off the clock, similar to what we saw from Georgia Tech when they knocked out Florida State back in week 0, if they can even somewhat replicate that with that three-headed trio, keep Indiana's offense on the sidelines and actually score, that's how I think they're going to win this game. And obviously some of the other things they have to keep in mind: don't turn the ball over, avoid the silly mistakes. This is the holdings and the false starts early on. Don't get that stadium in Bloomington bumping, because it's going to be tough there once the Hoosiers have the momentum.
Yeah, the running back room is what stood out to me when I was looking at this team. It's rare that you have a group of 5 team with the number of productive guys that FIU has. I mean, you've got multiple 500+ yard running backs coming back that can share the wealth. It's similar to the way Indiana's going to approach it with their running backs, interchangeable guys that, obviously injuries happen to running backs, but really keeping those guys fresh, being able to spread it out 10 to 15 carries between about 3 guys. Is that what you would expect?
Yeah, we are still excited to see how FIU will handle having those 3 running backs. I honestly couldn't tell you who will be the starter, but I am sure they'll all get playing time in this game just to test the waters and see who should be the starter going forward. After this game against Indiana, the whole month of September is in South Florida. They have 3 games at Pit Bull Stadium, not to mention a trip to Boca Raton to take on our rivals FAU. So there's going to be a lot to take away from this game against a very solid Big Ten opponent that'll determine what FIU wants to do for the whole month of September and onward.
Let's talk a little bit about the quarterback, Keon Jenkins. What does he bring to the table that can give defenses problems?
Keon was a scary threat last season because he had solid pocket awareness and was a very great scrambler in the event that the pocket collapsed. Not to mention, he is a local Miami-grown talent that had a lot of hype surrounding him when he committed to FIU. He showed lots of flashes of potential last season, and in this offseason, in both summer and fall practices, he's bulked up exponentially, and he's taken on the leadership role that is to be expected when you're handed the keys to the offense like he has. So, no, there's a lot to be excited about Keon. I think he has extremely high potential. There were some games last season where he proved that, such as that game against North Texas and UConn and UConn as a couple of examples where he really popped off. There were some games where he had the interception problems where sometimes he would throw a couple of footballs with max pressure on him that would go to the other team. That's something he'll be trying to avoid this season. Like I said, he's going to be the leader of this offense. If you recall last season for Keon, he did not start in week 0 against Louisiana Tech, but after a bad performance from our original quarterback, Rayson James, he started every single game since. So this is going to be his offense from the get-go now, and he's ready for that leadership role.
To me, on paper at least, receiver looks like a little bit of a concern, possibly. Chris Mitchell transferring to Notre Dame, big loss. I know you've got Dean Patterson as kind of wide receiver 1. He steps into that role. Are they still searching for answers beyond him?
Yes, they are, because it's unfortunately, because of the way the transfer portal is, it's tough to keep very high talent. I'm sure you guys at Indiana would know all about that, about having to keep this talent in one way or another. And Chris Mitchell was a phenomenal receiver for the Panthers. Obviously, Dean Patterson brings experience. He's got great hands. He's very fast. Most people tend to hype him up more as a punt returner than an actual wide receiver. He is a very good punt returner. They did bring in a few transfers that I'm very excited to see perform for them this season. One of them is Desna Washington. This guy is an absolute freak. He's over 7 feet tall, has really great hands. He can jump up and go for the ball in deep territory. You also have Nazaviah Burris from Stetson, who has been one of their best wide receivers. But yeah, the wide receiver room, definitely a lot of questions still remaining. I think out of the entire offense, they bring the most uncertainty. Not to mention, we will be interested to see if FIU this season will utilize their tight ends more in actual passing plays, other than just keeping them as more so blockers for the running backs or for Keon Jenkins. Rocky Beers is a very nice talent, so is Josiah Meeman. So I'm interested to see where they go for them.
Let's switch over to the other side of the ball. What do you think concerns FIU on defense? And what do you think they can lean on as something that they're not too concerned about that could be a strength? Indiana, we don't know what the heck to expect from the offense. It's essentially a totally new group. So it's hard to say what IU's going to lean on as a strength. They'd like to be balanced, but a deep group of receivers, a veteran quarterback with Curtis Rourke. But how to approach IU's offense is something I'm sure FIU's coaching staff is trying to figure out.
Yeah.
What can they lean on?
They've been watching a lot of James Madison film from last season because of how many Dukes transferred over to the Hoosiers. Not to mention, FIU's defense does have some very solid playmakers, including linebacker Reggie Peterson, who I've said in the past is the best player on FIU, regardless of position. I think Reggie is the best player they have. He already had a solid junior season last year alongside Donovan Manuel, who has since been drafted by the Houston Roughnecks of the UFL. Now it's Reggie Peterson's show for the linebacker room and the rest of the defense for that matter. And again, he's similar to Keewan. He has taken up the mantle of being the captain of the defense very well. So, and not just biased because we absolutely love Reggie and he's a fan of the show. We've had him on, but no, his stats from last year are absolutely insane. And there's a lot of hype surrounding him. At the defensive line, you also keep an eye out on Jeremy Passmore. He also looked to be a troublemaker for the Panthers on defense. Where I think FIU might struggle a bit is in their secondary. They do have some solid backs. They actually have a lot of returners from last season, including Hezekiah Massis, JoJo Evans, Brian Blades II, and whatnot. But similar to Indiana, it's funny because I had the chance to speak with Ben not that long ago, and I brought it up. Indiana gave up a lot of points per game last season. FIU gave up a lot of points per game last season. The final 4 games of the season for FIU, they all gave up 40 points each. And that was in the midst of a run to get into 6 wins for bowl eligibility. So they tend to give up a lot of points early in games. There were a few games against UTEP and Jacksonville State where they gave up 21 unanswered points off the rip, which set up FIU's defense to have to climb back into those games, which they ultimately did not do. They just need to limit Indiana's scoring one way or another. Against the best offenses in Conference USA, like Liberty and Jacksonville State, they struggled. So they're really going to have to step that up. And again, you do have, like I mentioned, great players like Reggie Peterson and Jeremy Passmore. The secondary has veteran leadership, but they're really going to have to step up to avoid the deep balls and make sure that running backs don't ultimately break away.
Okay. Yeah, and Jeremy Passmore, former Indiana Hoosier, transferred to FIU. He's obviously from that area originally. And then Reggie Peterson apparently made some comments today about Indiana attempting to poach him. So obviously they know he's a good player.
I can actually speak about this. He talked about this yesterday in the press conference for FIU. He's in an area, he grew up in an area in South Florida, I believe West Florida, which apparently had a lot of recruitment from Indiana University, but he never ultimately got the call up. He was not accepted into Indiana. He says he still doesn't know why, but it's kind of a chip on his shoulder, and I'm sure it's something he won't forget when heading to Bloomington this Saturday. Same thing with Jeremy Passmore, like you said, a former Hoosier. So bit of irony that there's those connections on defense for FIU, but obviously, actions speak louder than words. So let's see what they actually do up there in Big Ten territory. The whole FIU team is excited. They say at least Mike McIntyre said they're not going to be fazed about playing in what I'm going to assume is a sold out crowd in Memorial Stadium, and they welcome the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, it's a team obviously used to playing in big environments in the non-conference, and then Conference USA. You go to some places there that definitely have passionate fan bases and support their teams as well. So, if you're looking at this game, you mentioned some potential struggles on defense, and one way to mitigate that, of course, is ball control on offense. Shorten that game like Georgia Tech did. That game, I think it was Florida State from, I think it might have been in the last 12 minutes of that game. They touched the ball one time, something like that. That's what you're looking for. And Indiana, obviously, wanting to make sure they get ahead and don't let Florida International control the tempo. So, we always ask for predictions. Obviously, it's a fool's errand with so many changes in college football on every roster, especially Indiana, basically a totally new program coming into this year, and FIU with a lot of questions as well. But we are fools. We will take on that fool's errand, ask you for your prediction for this coming Saturday. And then I want to kind of expand that and ask you after this game what your prediction for FIU's remainder of the season
Okay.
ends up record-wise, so we can kind of keep track of that. Hold you to it. Obviously, you get no credit if you're right, and we will rip you on the show if you're wrong.
Oh,
Just kidding. But that's the way it goes, right? I mean, if you're right
yeah.
about
Oh,
it,
yeah,
nobody
I get
remembers
it.
that. But if you're wrong, you don't ever hear the end of it. But go ahead.
Of course, TJ. I think this is going to be a very low-scoring contest in the first half. Obviously, both offenses are going to be working through some kinks, especially Indiana's offense, because, like you said, they're still figuring out all the new transfers they have coming in and who to rely on. Same with FIU, to a slight extent. I think the scoring is going to pick up exponentially in the second half. I think FIU is actually going to keep it close. I think taking FIU plus, I believe it's 21 and a hook right now,
Yes.
is not a bad bet. I'm not saying this is a trap game for Indiana, but I do think they really better watch out because FIU can definitely steal a win in Bloomington if they're not careful. But I do ultimately have the Hoosiers winning. I predicted this a couple of days ago. I believe I went with Indiana by a score of 27-21 over FIU. Now, for the rest of the season, I actually do think it'll be a solid year for FIU athletics. They have a favorable non-conference schedule after Indiana, taking on Central Michigan in the MAC, then what could be a coin flip game between FAU over in the AAC, and then hosting Monmouth from FCS. FIU is playing a lot of, I don't want to say bad teams in Conference USA, but based on their rosters and how they've changed via transfer portal, there's not a lot to be excited about in the terms of UTEP, New Mexico State, and obviously Kennesaw State, who's just joining from FCS.
Right.
I have them going 7-4 and actually making it to a bowl game, and 7 wins. It should be a relatively decent one as well. It's what we're all hoping for. Back-to-back 4-8 seasons. I mean, considering that they went 1-11 and 0-5 prior to Coach Mike's arrival, it's definitely a step up, but there needs to be more than just another 4-8 season. And I think if FIU stays healthy on both sides of the ball, and if the play calling on offense is good and not conservative as it has been at times before, I think this might actually be a solid season for the Panthers.
Jake, appreciate your time. Let us know where fans can find your content, both for this Indiana game, for your post-game coverage, and throughout the season to keep up with Indiana's opponents.
So you can follow the PawsUp Podcast on all social media platforms at PawsUp Podcast. All episodes of the show, as well as our preview show, halftime reports, and post-game show, will go live on our X, our Instagram, and our YouTube accounts. We also have our own website called the PawsUp page, where you can find written previews and recaps for every game this season, not to mention an episode archive. We've been fortunate enough to record over 60 episodes of the podcast since late 22 when we started. We have featured guests of the university and athletics, not including current and former players and coaches for all major sports. We've had Mike McIntyre, Keewan Jenkins, Rocky Beers, and so on our show from football. We've even, not that long ago, had the president of our university, Dr. Kenneth Jessel, on, which was super cool for us.
Yeah.
Athletic director Scott Carr. No, it's been a fun grind for us here at the PawsUp Podcast, and we continue to grow. And can't thank you guys enough for hopping on and also letting us borrow Ben for our PawsUp preview, which will drop Friday at 8 p.m.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, it's been fun having this little partnership as we get going. We know it's a grind is a good way to put it, but the off season finally over. We can finally get to actual football. We appreciate your time. We'll check in with you after the game and keep following FIU throughout the season. Thanks a lot, Jake.
Thank you guys very much. PawsUp.
Yep. Thank you, Jake. All right, TJ, thanks for handling that while I got a little guy to sleep. We'll get Jake out of here again. Thanks for coming on. Covers all FIU sports. Great follow on Twitter.
Yeah, they do a great job.
And all that stuff. So Fantastic work from them. And let's get to some IU stuff.
Sure. Yep. So, interesting. And I think that Jake makes a lot of good points about the way that FIU is going to approach this game. I know that Indiana fans are understandably fired up and excited for the Curt Cignetti era, ready to get it going. I totally get that, but I do think it's crucial for the team that what us fans think irrelevant. We can get us fired up and go crazy about potential records and all that, predictions of 9-3, 8-4, 7-5, whatever. That's fine. We can go crazy. The team hopefully can remain focused on this is not just some new era for Indiana football. It's not about what record is going to be this year or these high hopes. It's strictly about lining up against FIU and beating them. It's one game at a time. That is a cliche, absolutely, but it is true. Florida International, they've got a lot of good athletes on that team. A lot of guys from Florida, like Reggie Peterson, that wanted to be recruited by major conference schools, and we're not. And they've got a chip on their shoulder. They've got an axe to grind. They've got they want to prove that they belong at this level. A lot of Indiana players that are going to be suiting up were in the same exact boat until Curt Cignetti got the Indiana job, and they came to IU. So it's not a too dissimilar situation. And I think the way that he talked about how FIU is going to approach this game, they've got those interchangeable running backs. Indiana, maybe some questionable defensive line depth. You want to push that running game if you're FIU, control that clock, grind it out. And I think what you're really hoping for is a similar kind of flow to the Florida State-Georgia Tech game. Georgia Tech was running that play clock down under 10 seconds every snap. They barely threw the ball, kept it on the ground, were able to get 4, 5, 6 yards of carry, wear that Florida State defensive front down, and that puts you in position to be in a chance to win the game at the end. Now, for Indiana, they need to avoid falling into the trap that Florida State did, which I thought was being way too conservative on the offensive side of the ball and being afraid to have their offense make mistakes. You saw that from DJ Uiagalelei. It looked to me like he was scared to make mistakes, and their coaching staff did not want to put him into position to stretch the field. That plays right into FIU's hands if Indiana's going to play that game in a phone booth and not spread out the field. IU should be able to really get after Florida International secondary.
Yeah,
the defensive numbers for FIU's secondary last year, not good at all. And honestly, I don't think their defensive line is that great either.
No, we talked about Jeremy Passmore. We talked about Jeremy Passmore a little bit. He's the veteran on that defensive line that needs to step up.
Yeah, so, and for me, this is a game that could be tricky for sure. I think that FIU will not be overwhelmed by the atmosphere in Bloomington. I think it'll be a good crowd, but I mean, Indiana's not a place that a road team is going to go and be terrified. The program's not at that stage yet. Hopefully, the atmosphere is awesome. That would be great. It'd be a big help. But the expectation is probably it's going to be fine. It's going to get loud on third downs, but people are by and large just going to be waiting out, kind of let's see what this is going to be. So I don't think they're going to be overwhelmed by the atmosphere. They're going to come expecting to be able to compete. And, I think it's going to be interesting to me to see how quick of a start Indiana can get out to with what is essentially a brand new team. You've got a new coaching staff. They've been together, and that helps a lot. But with this group of players and in this atmosphere, it's going to be interesting to see how they're able to kind of merge their experiences that they've had together as a staff with this group of players. That to me is going to be one of the more interesting parts of Saturday. How quickly can Indiana get into a rhythm? And it doesn't help if FIU is able to have, possessions of 6 or 7 minutes where they're able to run the ball consistently. You've got to force them into passing situations where you can get after the quarterback. Keon Jenkins, good player. He can play, but I do not think that their wide receiver group should be able to hurt Indiana's secondary if IU can get after the quarterback. And that's a big thing for me, is at the lines of scrimmage, is Indiana able to overwhelm Florida International? If they cannot, that's a red flag moving forward, and it would put Indiana in trouble for this game on Saturday as well. Another key for me is going to be Indiana's passing attack against that secondary. Mentioned that one earlier. That one, I think IU's receiver group, we all think they're going to be really good this year.
Yep.
If so, this is a great game to start with, because you should be able to do damage against this secondary. So Indiana's offensive line, can they provide a clean pocket for Curtis Rourke? And if they can, get the ball to these receivers, let them go to work. And if you're Curtis Rourke, just get off to a solid start. Take care of the ball. Don't put FIU's offense in advantageous positions with turnovers that can be a great equalizer in matchups like this. Just get the ball to your playmakers, make the smart decision, and let them go to work against a secondary that I don't think can stick with this group of receivers.
Yeah, and we've seen in the series history, while IU is 3-0, their games have come down to the fourth quarter. You saw in 2015 when IU had a super talented team. FIU's going in for the tying touchdown, and Andre Brown takes it back for like 96 yards for a touchdown.
Right.
Again, 2018, Peyton Ramsey throws an early pick. Yep. FIU takes a lead down there. I forgot the 2016 game was kind of close too, but IU put it away put away in the second half. So this FIU team, they're always going to be tough. They've got South Florida kids.
Exactly.
They play hard, and now you have kids with chips on their shoulders who IU didn't offer and things like that. So this is an audition for a lot of FIU players, maybe in the transfer portal for next year too.
Unfortunately,
Yeah, the
That's
weather,
reality.
the weather in Bloomington on Saturday is 50-50 because it's Indiana, and taking care of the ball and stuff like that. Kirk Cignetti's teams usually don't shoot themselves in the foot. I think they were second in turnover margin in the Sun Belt last year, fourth in fewest
penalties. Yep.
First and fewest penalties. So we'll see. But let's get on to you talked about what you wanted to see from IU. Here's what I want to see from IU. Yeah, you want to see them play well. I want to see the operation go well. I want to see no delay of game penalties coming out of a TV timeout. Now there are new rules. There's a 2-minute warning and things like that we have to get used to. But it seems like
head comms,
the head comms, all that stuff should make it a lot easier and a lot smoother game operation. And then we'll see what the offensive line does without Nick Kidwell. Can they gel? It's basically a whole new unit, and that's the thing. Can they gel? And that's what I want to see. Let's get into predictions, TJ, before we get out of here.
Yeah, I mean that you mentioned it. It's kind of ties in with my point there. How quickly can IU get into rhythm? If they get into rhythm quickly, and that includes coaching staff meshing with the players, that includes adjusting to that head comm. It's going to be your green dot players is what you're going to hear the commentators talk about. Usually it's going to be a linebacker and it's going to be your quarterback. For Indiana, that's going to be the case. It's going to be Fisher and it's going to be Rourke. How do those guys adjust to that in game? You can practice with it, but it's going to be totally different in the game. So, how does that operation go? How quickly can he get in a rhythm on offense? It's a new system for a lot of these guys, new group of players, new group of teammates. That's going to be interesting. I think that what I lean on is giving this coaching staff the benefit of the doubt. And that means looking at past experience. Their teams have typically done well right out of the gate.
Yes, I
They've
think
come in, made
Nate
adjustments.
Nate wrote about that last year. Kirk Cignetti's
Exactly.
first year at JMU. You know, they lost a close one to West Virginia and then went 14-2 and lost, I think, in the championship game in the FCS playoffs.
Yep. And to me, that says that Kurt Cignetti and this staff have been through this process before. There are different variables, but they've been through a new team, a new program. They've been through it before. They know what they're doing. I give them the benefit of the doubt. That doesn't mean everything's going to go perfect. Doesn't mean there won't be some bumps in the road, even on Saturday. But I do think that we are going to see a competent, confident Indiana football team against Florida International. And I give them the benefit of the doubt in my prediction. So I'm going to go with the Indiana Hoosiers putting up 38 points. I think it's going to be a good offensive day, even though it's a new system. I think you're going to see IU's skill players have really solid day against this FIU defense, which I don't think is up to stopping it. So I'm going to go with Indiana 38, FIU 20.
Ooh,
So I'm going to go with
not
FIU
the cover.
covering just a little bit. Maybe it'll be a backdoor cover with the late touchdown against Indiana's young backups or something. Who knows? But I think Indiana will be comfortable heading into the fourth quarter. And even the most jaded of Indiana fans can breathe a little bit during this coming fourth quarter on Saturday.
Yeah, that's about how I see the game playing out. With Nate, one of our writers, wrote today in his Inside the Numbers, the IU's head coach, first-year head coach, hasn't won an opener in a long time since Bill Lynch was head coach. Kevin Wilson lost to Ball State. Tom Allen lost to Ohio State. I mean, you could go back to Bill Mallory. He went 0-11 in his first season.
Yeah.
Getting off to a hot start has been rare for an Indiana head coach, and this is a chance for Kirk Cignetti to build on that momentum. Are there going to be hiccups? Yes. Should fans immediately go, oh no, this isn't working at the first sign if somebody false starts? No, of course not. It's the first game of the first year of Kirk Cignetti. However, I do think IU is just more talented than FIU. It should play out. Mike McIntyre is a good coach, but I just think talent and coaching will overcome, a solid coach with not as much talent. So I see Indiana. They might feel their way through the first half, but pull away in the second half. You see some backups in the second half, hopefully, and then put it away. Now, the score will probably depend on the weather. If it's a lousy weather game, it's probably not going to be at that high scoring. But I'm with you. I see, Indiana like 41 and FIU 20, just barely not getting that cover. But, a comfortable win where you feel good about it going into a short week with Western Illinois on a Friday night.
Yeah, I think that would be something that, barring you get out of it healthy, I think everybody would breathe a sigh of relief and gladly move on if that were the outcome. So I think we can all agree it has been a long off season. We are very, very ready to see the Kurt Cignetti area kick off in Bloomington with the official first game. It's going to be a ton of fun. We're looking forward to covering it. I'm excited, a little bit nervous, just because hopes have gotten so high And as an IU football fan, you're so used to being disappointed, to put it charitably. But I'm really excited to get this thing underway and have the Hoosiers back on the gridiron on Saturday. College football kicks off in earnest this week. Lots of games tonight, a few on Friday, and then of course big 3-day jamboree with Saturday jam-packed, a game on Sunday, a game on Monday. We will not have another weekend without college football for the remainder of 2024. So that's worth celebrating.
Yeah. And just a few notes, fans who are going to the game, Upstairs Pub is running their second annual breakfast club to kick off the season. It is presented by Upland on the first game. The first 200 people in the door get a free game day t-shirt and breakfast, plus Upland's game day lager, just $4 for every IU football game this year. They have a new state-of-the-art room with the fully functioning sports ticker, 100-foot HD TVs, and the old IU scoreboard from Assembly Hall. So Upstairs Pub has definitely changed from when I was a student there, and it looks like an awesome place to start your pregame festivities, and then move on to Memorial Stadium, watch the game there, and then read about it at HoosierHuddle.com. So head up to Upstairs Pub for their breakfast club presented by Upland on Saturday, 7 a.m. First 200 people in the door get free breakfast and a free t-shirt. So that's awesome. And, we look forward to hopefully breaking down an IU win on Sunday and Monday. So thanks, TJ, for carrying the load tonight. Maddox, thanks you. And thanks again to PawsUp Podcast for coming on. Great stuff from them. Do go up to their PawsUp page. They have all their position group previews, as well as some spring practice and fall practice updates as well. So keep coming back to @Hoosier_Huddle, HoosierHuddle.com. All final countdown day is tomorrow. You could, just click on the tag 2024 countdown to kickoff to go through all the player profiles. We also have our first glance previews and then our game week stuff, including know your opponent and matchups to watch that TJ wrote, inside the numbers from Nate. And then we'll have the full game day primer, including this podcast, coming out tomorrow to get you ready for Saturday's showdown in Bloomington. That'll hopefully start on time at 3:30 p.m. at Memorial Stadium, as we are dealing with some weather on a Thursday night in college football.
Yep. Big Ten Network. I think it's an overflow channel for most people. So that'll be on the TV. It's on the IU Radio Network, and we'll have all the pregame, postgame coverage, and then, of course, do it all again for week 2. So thanks, everybody, for spending your preview time with us. Let's get ready for the season. Go Hoosiers.
Yep. Again, apologize for Maddox being kind of cranky tonight. It's okay. But hopefully we got you the information that you needed to.